Let me ask you something personal. When did you last feel like a stranger in your own home? Not just ignored, but silently exiled, like your presence was tolerated more than it was welcomed. Maybe it was subtle at first, a shift in tone, a dinner eaten alone, a door that stayed shut too long. Or maybe, like me, it hit you like a train, all at once, no warning. If you're here, chances are you're searching for answers, just like I was. You're wondering what could drive a parent and child so far apart that one would shove the other down, quite literally, into the basement, and the other would retaliate not with screaming or slamming doors, but with something far more devastating, cutting the digital lifeline that modern life can't survive without: Wi-Fi. Yes, you heard that right. My son let me sleep in the basement of the very house I built. He didn't say it outright. There were no cruel words, no shouting match, but his actions spoke volumes. So, I did what any parent would do when pushed to the margins of their own life. I waited. I listened. And when the time was right, I flipped the script in a way that left him speechless, cut off, and finally, forced to face the one thing he'd been running from me. But before you judge me or him too quickly, let me say this. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about neglect, boundaries, roles that reverse when time pulls us in directions we never expected. It's about sacrifice, power, silence, and the one thing that binds or breaks every family: respect. So if you've ever felt underappreciated, if you've ever wondered when love turns into obligation, and when obligation mutates into resentment, then this story will speak directly to the bruises you don't show anyone. And don't worry, you're going to get every answer you came here for. Stick with me until the end, because what happened in that house didn't just reshape our relationship, it revealed the truth about who we were all along. I want you to picture it. Suburban Ohio. Quiet neighborhood. Snow melting in uneven patches on the lawn. I'm 61, recently retired. Not a millionaire, but I worked hard, put in 4 decades at the factory, missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my own mother's funeral because we couldn't afford the airfare. All of it so I could buy a modest home, raise a family, and one day, pass the torch to my only son. My wife passed 5 years ago, cancer, and since then, it's just been the two of us. Or at least it was supposed to be. His name is Tyler. Smart kid. Always had his nose in a screen growing up. Computers, coding, gaming, you name it, he could break it down and rebuild it better than anyone. I was proud of him. Still am, in a way. He's 28 now, living in the same house we shared while he builds his freelance career from home. He said it was temporary, just until he gets ahead. I believed him, at first. I gave him space. I cooked, cleaned, paid most of the bills while he locked himself in his room with noise-canceling headphones and takeout containers piling up on the floor. I didn't ask for much. Just dinner together now, and then a movie night, a check-in. But weeks turned into months, and slowly, it felt like I was living with a ghost. One day I noticed my recliner had been pushed to the garage. Then the coffee machine disappeared from the kitchen, my coffee machine. Asked Tyler about it and got a shrug. Just making room, he mumbled. But making room for who? For what? Eventually, my things were boxed up, piece by piece. First the living room, then the guest room. Then one rainy evening, I came home from a walk to find my bed had been moved downstairs to the cold, musty basement. No conversation. No explanation. Just a folded note that read, "Need more space for work. Hope this is okay." That's all it said. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for anger to rise, but it didn't. What I felt was worse. Emptiness. Like I didn't matter. Like I had become a tenant in my own home. And in that moment, I realized something vital. Love without respect is not love at all. It's duty. It's guilt. It's obligation wrapped in silence. That first night in the basement, I couldn't sleep. My back ached. The furnace clicked and groaned like it was mocking me. I stared up at the ceiling, listening to the faint echo of his laughter upstairs, probably on a video call, gaming with friends, or streaming his favorite shows we used to watch together. And that's when the idea came. I didn't plan it. It wasn't spiteful. It was instinct. A quiet click of logic in my head. He needed space?
Fine.
I'd give him all the space in the world. And I'd do it by taking back the one thing he valued more than physical comfort, his Wi-Fi. Now, before you think I just flipped a switch in a fit of rage, understand, this wasn't about control. It was about balance. Tyler didn't need another lecture or confrontation. Those never worked. He needed a mirror. He needed to feel what it was like to be isolated, disconnected, unnoticed, just like he made me feel. And so I waited.
I watched his patterns.
I studied the router like a military operation. Timing, bandwidth, device history. I learned which ports he used when he was active, what platforms he couldn't live without. It became a silent game between us. I started with random outages. A few minutes here, a few minutes there. He'd yell from his room, "Dad, is the internet down?" I'd shout back, "Beats me," and go back to watching old DVDs in the basement. He never suspected.
But soon I escalated.
Streaming lagged. Downloads froze. His Discord server mysteriously disconnected at peak hours. And when I finally pulled the plug for real, he unraveled. You see, Tyler's world existed almost entirely online. No Wi-Fi meant no income, no entertainment, no escape. Suddenly, the house he dominated became a cage. And the funny thing is, he didn't come storming down to scream at me. He didn't throw a tantrum. He got quiet. Quieter than I had ever seen him. That silence? That was the sound of walls breaking. And behind those walls was a young man forced to reckon with what he'd become and who he had pushed away. But here's the twist. This isn't the part where he apologizes and we hug it out over dinner. No, this story gets deeper. Much deeper. Because what happened next wasn't just about internet access. It was about emotional access. Hidden emails. Secret financial records. Something I never expected. Something he never intended me to find. And once I did, everything changed. Everything. So, I'm asking you, are you ready to see the full picture? Ready to understand the choices that can shatter a family or rebuild it from the ground up? Because what started as a father's quiet rebellion turned into a revelation that exposed more than just disrespect. It uncovered betrayal, desperation, and a truth Tyler thought he could hide forever.
Keep watching.
You've only scratched the surface. What's coming next will make you question everything. It's strange how quickly the ordinary can twist into something unrecognizable. One moment you're a parent doing the grocery run, paying the gas bill, sweeping dead leaves from the porch, and the next, you're a ghost wandering through the rooms you once filled with life. Before I ever touched that router, I spent weeks in the basement trying to make sense of how I got there, tracing back each moment like it was a breadcrumb left behind. The truth is, I didn't always feel invisible. After my wife passed, Tyler and I had something rare, shared grief that bonded us tighter than we'd ever been. We'd eat takeout on the couch in our pajamas, binge-watch mystery thrillers until sunrise, cry without shame during commercial breaks. I thought we were healing together. But healing doesn't always move at the same speed. And while I slowed down to hold on to memories, he sped up, chased new distractions, buried himself in screens and algorithms and online projects I couldn't pronounce. At first, I chalked it up to age. He's just trying to stay busy. I'd tell myself. He's coping in his own way. But as weeks turned to months, it started feeling like I was the only one still carrying the weight. I'd set out 2 plates for dinner and find one still clean the next morning. I'd ask about his day and get a nod or a muffled fine without eye contact. He stopped asking how I was altogether. The kindness didn't vanish all at once. It faded, like the dimming of a light bulb you don't even notice until the room's gone dark. Then came the calls, or more accurately, the ones he didn't take. I started overhearing pieces of conversations through the floorboards. Phrases like, "I'll talk to him later," or "he's just stubborn," and once, chillingly, "he's not going to be around forever." I wanted to believe it wasn't about me, but deep down something stirred. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being phased out. Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't want to become the angry parent he could justify cutting off. Instead, I watched. I observed. I noticed things no one thought I was smart enough to understand. For instance, Tyler had recently stopped receiving physical mail. Everything had gone digital. I knew because I checked, innocently at first, then with growing curiosity. The house was still in my name, but the bank had started sending fewer statements. Utilities were being redirected. Packages arrived addressed only to T Enterprises, which I'd assumed was some quirky gamer name for his online gig. But then I found a half-shredded receipt in the trash for a laptop, $3, 200. Top-tier specs, multiple quantities. And it wasn't his signature at the bottom. It was mine. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe he used my name to get a discount. Maybe it was some online store policy. But that night, while pretending to reorganize the basement shelves, I booted up my old desktop. Dusty, sluggish, but still connected to the home network. I pulled up our shared ISP account, something he probably assumed I no longer knew how to access, and started digging. That's when I saw it. Multiple IP addresses registered under devices I didn't recognize. Heavy data usage during hours when I knew Tyler was asleep. And one MAC address labeled server /_02 T-key, connected 24/7. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my chest. Tyler wasn't just freelancing or gaming. He was running something big. And if my name was on the billing, that meant whatever he was doing, legal or not, was tied to me. That's when the questions started piling up, faster than I could answer them. Was he hiding something? Was someone helping him? Why the secrecy? And most importantly, why push me away so coldly unless he needed me out of sight? I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there in the dark, staring up at the exposed beams of the basement ceiling, wondering how far this had gone. The next morning, I started paying closer attention to the sounds upstairs. Not just his footsteps or his keyboard clicking, but visitors, quick exchanges at the door, hushed voices, short visits that never lasted more than a few minutes. I once heard a woman's voice. Low, confident, irritated. I couldn't make out her words, but Tyler's tone was different with her. Less dismissive, more desperate. It wasn't a girlfriend. It didn't sound like anyone friendly. And then there was the night I heard him whispering on the phone saying, "He won't interfere, trust me. He's harmless." Harmless. That word stuck with me like a splinter under the skin. Was that really how my own son saw me? A harmless old man in the basement. Out of sight, out of mind, too slow and too tired to pose any threat to his secrets? Maybe that's why he never noticed when I started documenting things. Timestamps. IP activity. Strange emails I could barely decipher but recognized for what they were, hidden, encrypted, coded in a way meant to avoid detection. And all routed through our household connection. There were moments I questioned myself. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe grief was playing tricks on me. I even called an old friend, Don, a retired police officer I used to bowl with. I didn't give specifics, just said I was worried about some strange activity my son might be involved in. Don told me something that stuck. Sometimes the ones closest to you keep the darkest secrets. Not because they're bad people, but because they're afraid of what they've become. I held on to that for days. Then something shifted. Tyler started acting nicer. Not warm, not like before, but polite.
Polished.
He brought me coffee once, black, no cream, just how I like it. Told me he was thinking about moving out soon, said he was looking at places and would help fix up the basement as a thank you. It sounded rehearsed. I smiled, nodded, played along. But I didn't trust it. Because now I knew he was hiding something. And the kindness felt like a curtain being drawn over a crack in the wall. Around that same time, our internet suddenly began throttling. Not just his, mine too. My movies would buffer. My downloads would freeze. He played it off like it was the service provider. But when I called them, they told me someone had recently made administrative changes to our network settings from an unknown login location. And that's when I realized the game had flipped again. He knew I was watching him, and now he was watching me back. That's when the paranoia set in. I started thinking about those quiet phone calls, the woman's voice, the strange men at the door, the shady financial trails. And the question that gnawed at the back of my mind like termites behind drywall, Was I just collateral in whatever he was involved in, or was I the target? I didn't know the answer yet, but I was about to find out. Because one morning, I went to unplug the router as part of my ongoing maintenance and noticed a tiny device attached to the underside of the shelf beside it. Small, black, blinking. I didn't recognize it at first, but when I peeled it off and held it in my hand, it hit me. Tyler had bugged the basement. So, if you're still with me, buckle up. Because this isn't just a story about a father reclaiming space. It's about betrayal that runs deeper than blood and secrets that never stay buried. And if you think the worst is over, you're wrong. It hadn't even started. The next few days felt like I was tiptoeing through a minefield when I hadn't even realized I was living in until now. After finding the bug in the basement, a tiny recording device no bigger than a lighter, I didn't confront Tyler. I knew better. I placed it back exactly where I found it and pretended I hadn't noticed. But that discovery changed everything. It confirmed what I'd feared. This wasn't just a son trying to push boundaries or claim space. This was something calculated, monitored. It wasn't just about me being in the way. I was being watched and possibly managed like a variable in a larger plan. And if he planted that one device, how many others were there? I started checking everything. Light fixtures, electrical outlets, even the old smoke detector that hadn't chirped in over a year. I found nothing else, but the paranoia had already rooted itself. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards above felt heavier. I'd hear whispers and stop whatever I was doing, heart pounding, afraid even to breathe too loudly. Tyler had grown even more elusive, leaving the house for longer stretches, always returning with a forced smile and that same hollow cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. He had the tone of someone pretending everything was normal while walking a tightrope over a pit of lies. Then came the morning I woke up to find my desktop computer missing.
Gone.
Not stolen, not broken into, just removed. The table had been wiped clean, the wires tucked back neatly, as if it had never been there. I asked Tyler casually if he'd seen it, and he acted surprised, even concerned. Said maybe the movers took it early, which made no sense. Movers? He hadn't even signed a lease anywhere. That computer was my only way into the accounts, into the router logs, into everything I had been using to piece this puzzle together. And now it was gone. Along with every file I had painstakingly saved. All the strange activity logs, the payment trails, the screenshots, my notes, everything. I felt the panic creeping in like smoke under a locked door. But I couldn't let him see it. So I smiled, nodded, told him I must have misplaced it. Later that afternoon, I checked the garage, the attic, the back of my car. Nothing. He'd taken it, and he wanted me to know it. This was a warning shot, not loud, not messy, but unmistakably clear. Stop looking. But I wasn't the type to back down. I've survived losing my wife, decades in a thankless job, a heart attack at 58, and raising a child alone. I wasn't going to be scared off by missing hardware and tight smiles. So I took a different approach. I started pretending I was slipping. I acted confused, forgetful. I fumbled my words on purpose, turned up the TV too loud, wandered around like I'd lost track of what day it was. Tyler bought it. He dropped his guard, thinking the pressure had gotten to me. But really, I was watching him closer than ever. And what I found next sent chills through me. One night, while taking out the trash, one of the few chores he still left to me, I noticed a man parked in a black SUV across the street. He wasn't doing anything illegal, just sitting there, engine off, lights out, phone in hand. But it wasn't the first time I'd seen him. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd shown up 3 times, always in the evening, always parked in the same spot. Once, I waved at him just to see what would happen.
He ignored me.
Just drove off like nothing happened. I didn't have proof of anything, but my gut told me he wasn't just there for a scenic drive through the suburbs. Then came the envelope. It arrived in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, plain, unlined, no signature. Just a printed message that read, *, stop digging. You've seen enough, *, that was it. No threat. No name. Just that cold command. I stood in the kitchen, That note trembling in my hand, staring at Tyler as he sat on the couch a few feet away, typing away on his laptop like none of this was happening. My mouth went dry.
Did he send it?
Was it from someone else entirely? Did he even know? That night, I didn't sleep. Again. But I did remember something I hadn't thought about in years. My wife. Before she passed, there had been whispers. Conversations late at night she'd cut off when I entered the room. Tense phone calls she claimed were with doctors, even though the tone didn't match. I had chalked it up to stress, to illness, to her wanting to shield me from bad news. But what if there had been more to it? The next day, I pulled out an old photo album, one of the last things Tyler hadn't boxed up or hidden. Tucked inside the back cover was a handwritten letter addressed to me, folded 3 times, yellowed at the edges. I hadn't seen it before. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. My hands trembled as I opened it, barely able to breathe. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a confession. She wrote about an old friend, a man named Curtis. A friend from her early years who helped her invest some savings during our marriage, a secret she kept from me because she didn't want to cause tension. She said she'd started something with Curtis, something digital, something she didn't fully understand, but which was generating significant results. She said she was afraid it had gotten too big and that Tyler had shown an unnatural interest in it. She warned me to be cautious, to keep an eye on both of them if something ever happened to her. That was the last sentence. I reread it 10 times before the meaning settled in. So now the puzzle shifted. Tyler didn't just build something dangerous. He may have inherited it. Something started long before I even knew it existed. And if Curtis was still alive, still involved, maybe he was the man in the SUV. Or worse, maybe someone else had picked up the torch and was trying to keep the past buried. I felt my knees weaken as a new possibility formed. What if this wasn't Tyler's secret to begin with? What if he was just continuing something or being used as the front for it? And if that were true, how deep did it go? Who else knew? Who was watching us? That's when I heard the soft knock at the basement door. Not the front door. The basement door, locked from the inside. A knock so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. When I opened it, no one was there. But lying on the top step was my missing computer. Turned on. Logged in. One single document open on the screen. A folder I hadn't created. Labeled with a date. A date from 7 years ago. And the name at the top of the file? Not mine. Not Tyler's. Curtis. I stared at it, heart frozen in my chest, unable to move, unable to breathe. Because what was written inside that file changed everything I thought I knew. And that's where things truly began to spiral. I didn't touch the keyboard right away. I just stared at the screen as the glow from the monitor lit up the basement like some kind of confessional booth. The document was open, plain text, no formatting, no passwords. The first line simply read, Curtis O. Hammond, Archive Directive, 2018. I felt my throat tighten as I slowly scrolled, expecting gibberish or code I couldn't understand. But the deeper I went, the more it read like a journal, no, a log. It was detailed, methodical, filled with references to test runs, asset movement, digital account routing, and behavioral analysis metrics. Most of it I couldn't fully comprehend, but one thing was painfully clear. This wasn't just a business or a side hustle. It was some kind of experimental data project involving user behavior, AI feedback loops, and algorithmic social control, all run through seemingly innocuous mobile apps and e-commerce platforms. And at the very bottom, in a faded font like an afterthought, was the final entry. Asterisk, he doesn't know what he's part of yet. But I fear the window to protect him has closed. Asterisk. The he was never named, but I knew it had to be Tyler. I leaned back, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was racing. None of this made sense. Curtis hadn't been in our lives for over 20 years. He was a passing name, a friend from my wife's early college days, someone I'd heard about only when old yearbooks surfaced. I always assumed he was a flirt, maybe an ex, someone she'd moved on from long before I came into the picture. But now his name was turning up on files hidden deep in our network, tied to my wife's final confessions and, possibly, to everything Tyler had been building without my knowledge. My mind started spinning with more questions than answers. Was Tyler replicating something Curtis had started with my wife? Had he inherited not just the infrastructure, but the secrecy too? And if so, what exactly were they all trying to protect him from? Before I could process any further, my phone buzzed upstairs. I bolted up the steps and checked it, still half expecting another anonymous warning or maybe a notification that something else had gone missing. But this time, it wasn't for me. It was from my sister, Deborah. We hadn't spoken much lately, just exchanged polite texts here and there. But her message stopped me cold. Asterisk, did you send me something? It's in your handwriting.
You need to call me.
Now. Asterisk. I called immediately, trying to keep my voice calm. She answered after one ring, her voice shaking. I got a letter this morning, she said. No envelope. Just slipped under my front door, sometime last night. It's your handwriting, Jim. At least it looks like it. But it says things you never told me. Things about Tyler. About some project you wanted me to keep safe if anything happened to you. My blood ran cold. What project? I asked. What else did it say? She hesitated. It said not to trust him. That he might be compromised. That he was being used. But the weirdest part, it had that same name in the corner. Curtis. I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the phone like a lifeline. I hadn't written any such letter. Someone had forged my handwriting, and they delivered it to Deborah in the middle of the night. Which meant one terrifying thing. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching me. They were widening the circle, bringing in the people closest to me, either to warn them or to send a message. And suddenly, I wasn't sure which it was. My head swirled with paranoia. Was Deborah in danger now? Was she already being followed? And why her? She wasn't involved in any of this. Unless someone was trying to discredit me. Plant out. Make me look unstable. That letter could make her question everything I said moving forward. Maybe that was the point. Divide and isolate. Classic manipulation tactic. But then again, maybe someone was genuinely trying to help. To break the silence from the outside. And if so, why go to such lengths to do it secretly? The deeper I went, the more this whole thing felt like a trap with no obvious walls, just shifting shadows and whispers behind closed doors. Then came another blow. I went back to the basement to take photos of the document for evidence, screenshots, anything I could back up to a private drive. But the file was gone.
Just like that.
The folder had vanished, and in its place was a single file titled Reset. When I opened it, there was just one sentence. You were never supposed to read this. That was it. No access logs, no recovery, no trace. Even a recycle bin was empty. I stared at the screen, stunned, helpless. Someone was inside the system, watching me in real time, and they had control over what I could and couldn't see. I started wondering if Tyler had even put that file there. Maybe he'd found it too. Maybe someone else had placed it there for both of us to stumble across. Or maybe, more disturbingly, someone was testing me, seeing how far I'd go before breaking. It was hard to know what to believe anymore. Every piece of evidence that emerged seemed to contradict the last. And then, as if this wasn't complicated enough, I got a visit. An older woman showed up at the front door claiming to be an old friend of my wife's. Her name was Camille. She wore a long coat, spoke softly, and seemed harmless enough. Said she'd found a photograph of my wife and wanted to return it. But the moment she stepped into the living room, her eyes scanned the space with too much familiarity. She asked strange questions. Is the upstairs still your son's workspace? Have you changed the Wi-Fi passcode since the last reset? Do you still keep the backup drives in the wall safe behind the furnace? I froze. She was either bluffing or had knowledge no stranger should have. I played dumb, thanked her for the photo, and quickly ushered her out. But the moment the door closed, I checked behind the furnace. And sure enough, the backup drives were gone. I hadn't told anyone about those. Not even Tyler. So now I had a mystery with no clear enemy, a son I couldn't fully trust, and a past I clearly never understood. And if Camille was part of this, whatever this was, then it meant there were people still lurking in the shadows of my wife's life, people who had never truly disappeared when she passed. People who were still watching, waiting, and maybe even pulling strings none of us could see. Everything felt like it was spiraling now. The notes. The fake letter to Deborah. The bug in the basement. The vanishing files. And now, someone walking into my home like they owned the blueprints. I didn't know who to trust. Not my son.
Not the faces from my past.
Not even my own memory anymore. For all I knew, this wasn't about Tyler at all. It might never have been. And just when I thought I couldn't feel more paranoid, more trapped, I found something tucked inside the photo Camille had left behind. A folded sticky note. With one question scribbled on it. Did she ever tell you the truth about what happened in 1997? My hands went cold. Because that was the year Tyler was born. The year everything began. And apparently the year I knew the least about. I didn't sleep that night.
I didn't even try.
I sat in the dark with the sticky note pressed between my fingers, staring out the front window like a man waiting for a storm he knows he can't stop. That question, asterisk, did she ever tell you the truth about what happened in 1997? Asterisk, played on a loop in my mind, growing louder every time I tried to push it aside. I kept asking myself what I'd missed, what secrets had been buried beneath the surface of that year. But no matter how hard I searched my memory, I couldn't find anything unusual. 1997 was supposed to be a good year. That was the year we brought Tyler home. The year we painted his nursery blue. The year I told my wife we'd finally made it. Our little family was complete. But now, I was beginning to wonder if that moment of happiness had been built on something I was never supposed to discover. The next morning brought no peace. The house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. Every floorboard creaked louder than usual. Every shadow looked out of place. I moved through the rooms cautiously, not because I expected someone to jump out, but because I didn't trust what I'd find if I looked too closely. I made coffee with shaky hands and tried calling Deborah to check in again, but she didn't answer. I left a message, then another.
Still nothing.
That wasn't like her. She might have been rattled by the letter, but she never ignored me, not even during the worst of our disagreements. By noon, I was pacing the kitchen, trying to tell myself not to panic. I convinced myself she probably just needed space, until I called her neighbor, Elaine, and asked if she'd seen her that morning. Elaine sounded confused. No, Jim, I haven't seen her since yesterday.
Her car's still in the driveway.
I rang the bell, but no one came to the door.
Why?
Is everything all right? I thanked her and hung up, but the icy pit in my stomach only deepened. I thought about driving over there, but something stopped me. Not fear of what I'd find, but fear of being watched. Because the moment I stood up from the kitchen table, I noticed it again. That same black SUV, parked 3 houses down, angled just enough to have a clean line of sight to my front door. I walked over to the blinds slowly and peered out through a narrow slit. The windows were tinted too dark to see the driver, but the engine was running. Not a neighbor. Not a delivery. Just sitting there like it was waiting for something. That's when the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen before I finally answered. A voice came through, low, steady, deliberate. Stop asking questions about the past. If you care about your sister, stop now. I froze, unable to speak. The voice didn't wait for a reply. It just clicked off, leaving me in a silence, so sharp it rang in my ears. That was the moment it shifted. Before that call, everything still felt like a game of cat and mouse, like I could outsmart whatever was happening if I moved carefully enough. But this was different. This was direct. Personal. And it wasn't just about Tyler anymore. Someone had eyes on my sister. Someone knew I was digging into things I wasn't meant to see. And worst of all, someone knew I was finally close to the truth. I didn't leave the house that day. I shut the curtains, locked the doors, and disconnected the Wi-Fi entirely. Not just for Tyler, but for me. I powered down every device I owned, removed the battery from my phone, and took apart the router piece by piece. Paranoia? Maybe. But if someone was watching us through these devices, I didn't want to make it easy for them. Tyler noticed the change. He came downstairs around dinner, eyes bleary from a day of missed internet. He asked what was going on, why everything was off. I told him there'd been a security breach, that we were being watched. He laughed. Not mockingly, nervously, like someone who didn't know which lie to stick with anymore. I asked him straight out, "Do you know someone named Curtis Hammond?" He didn't answer. Not with words. But the color drained from his face. Just for a moment. Then he forced a smile and shrugged.
Why should I?
That was all I needed. He knew. Not just the name, but what it meant. But I didn't push. I just nodded and walked away. Because I needed to think. I needed to breathe. And more than anything, I needed to figure out who I could still trust, if anyone. That night, I heard movement in the basement. Not the usual creaks of a settling house, but the sound of deliberate steps. Measured. Heavy. I crept down the stairs in the dark, heart hammering against my ribs, only to find nothing. Just the cold, empty space. But something was off. The back wall, where the old shelf used to be, was slightly ajar. I'd never noticed a seam there before. I reached for the edge and gave it a push, and, to my surprise, the panel swung open with a soft click. Behind it, there was a narrow crawl space, dark and damp, filled with old electrical panels, wires, and boxes I didn't recognize. At the center sat a weathered metal case. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. It was locked with a combination I didn't know. I tried my wife's birthday. Nothing. Tyler's? Still nothing. Then I tried the date on that sticky note, 1997. The lock clicked open. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes. Old, unlabeled, dusty. Alongside them, a handheld recorder with dead batteries. I grabbed a few tapes and brought them upstairs, digging through drawers for a pack of AA batteries I'd stashed months ago. When I finally got the recorder to work, the first tape hissed to life with static. Then a voice. Not mine. Not Tyler's. My wife's. I don't know who to trust anymore. Curtis keeps saying this will all pay off, that it's bigger than we imagined. But I don't want Jim to find out. Not yet. Not until I know it's safe. I dropped the recorder. My hands were shaking. So she did know. She'd been involved in something with Curtis long before I ever suspected. And whatever it wasn't just some side project. It was dangerous. She was afraid. And she was trying to protect me. Or hide something. Or both. The problem was, I didn't know how many more tapes there were.
Or what else she said.
But I knew one thing for sure. Someone out there didn't want me to hear them. And if Deborah really was missing, then time was running out. The next morning arrived in a haze, thick with the kind of dread you can't quite name but feel in your chest before your feet even touch the floor. The air in the house was too still, like it was waiting for something to break. I didn't bother making coffee. I didn't trust the silence enough to even turn on the machine. I just sat at the kitchen table, the recorder in front of me like a relic from another life, surrounded by a half-dozen dusty cassette tapes I hadn't dared to play yet. Each one of them might hold a piece of my wife's truth, or a lie I couldn't come back from. But before I could decide whether I had the stomach to listen to the next one, the front door opened. Tyler walked in, calm, clean-shaven, as if everything in our world hadn't already unraveled. He sat across from me like it was any other Sunday morning, looked me in the eye, and said, "I think it's time we talked." No deflection. No sarcasm. Just a flat, strange calm. I braced for another lie, another performance, but what he said next shattered everything I thought I knew about him, about us, and about the last 28 years of my life. "Dad," he said quietly, "you were never supposed to find the tapes. Not because they were about Mom, but because they were about you." I froze. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen in over a decade, my old digital camcorder. It was scratched, scuffed, and taped at the edges, but unmistakably mine. I hadn't used it since the early 2000s. I stared at it, confused. "Where did you get that?" I asked. His eyes didn't move. "It was in the attic. I found it 2 years ago. The files were still intact. You recorded more than you remember." He slid it across the table to me. My fingers wrapped around it with a mix of dread and disbelief. I didn't remember filming anything worth hiding. But when I turned it on and scrolled through the saved videos, my stomach flipped. There were hundreds of clips some I vaguely recalled: old birthdays, Christmas mornings, soccer games. But others I had no memory of. Long, uncut recordings of the basement. Of my wife, late at night, whispering into the phone. Of me, sitting at this very table, eyes glazed, answering questions like I was being interviewed. Some clips had timestamps that didn't add up. Others were corrupted or cut off mid-sentence. But the worst one was a grainy video dated January 12th, 1997. It was me, standing in a hospital hallway, holding a newborn. I was smiling, but something about my expression was off, detached, mechanical. A man stood beside me, holding a clipboard, wearing a visitor's badge. Not a doctor, not family. I didn't recognize him until I zoomed in. The name on the badge was Curtis Hammond. I felt my world lurch sideways. I couldn't look away. In the clip, Curtis was speaking softly to me. I couldn't hear every word over the background noise, but a few phrases pierced through. Experimental protocol, early behavioral tracking, test environment secured. My voice was on the tape too, agreeing. Not confused, not resistant.
Calm.
Cooperative. I wasn't being tricked. I was part of it. Tyler watched me, waiting for the realization to land. You volunteered, Dad, he said. You were part of the program. You and Mom both. She wanted out later, but by then it was too late. You'd already signed. You were one of the first families enrolled. My throat dried out. Enrolled in what? He leaned forward. They were running predictive models, parent-child dynamics under long-term surveillance. They wanted to know how technology would affect our relationships, how artificial environments would impact emotional intelligence. They seeded families with variables: money, grief, isolation, even manipulated internet behavior. We weren't just observed, Dad. We were conditioned. Everything from the way we lived to the way we connected. It was all data. My mind reeled. None of this made sense. And yet it explained everything. The emails, the strange logs, the bug in the basement, my wife's fear, her obsession with Curtis, the strange financial activity under my name, even the sudden emotional drift between me and my son. It wasn't just bad luck or personal failing. It was orchestrated,
Studied.
designed. Tyler continued, his voice low. When Mom died, that was the first time the project showed stress they couldn't predict. She tried to pull the plug before she passed. She sent warnings. I think that's why she recorded those tapes, for you, in case they erased your memory like they threatened. I blinked hard. Erased what? He hesitated. They didn't just monitor behavior. They tested memory suppression, sleep cycles, emotional redirection. That's why you lost chunks of time. Why some things don't add up. They needed test subjects who didn't know they were test subjects. The camcorder felt like it weighed 100 pounds now. I couldn't breathe. My life, my son, was part of an experiment? But even as he said it, something didn't sit right. If Tyler knew this, why had he stayed silent? Why had he pushed me into the basement, kept secrets, gaslit me when I asked questions? He must have seen the doubt on my face. That's why I needed you to stop digging, he said quickly. I was trying to protect you. I thought if I kept it going, if I fed them just enough data, I could eventually find out who's still pulling the strings. I wasn't trying to shut you out. I was trying to keep you out of harm's way. But his eyes betrayed something else.
Fear. Guilt.
And something I couldn't place. Because just as he finished speaking, we heard it. A single knock at the door. Then another. 3 quick raps.
Paused.
Then 3 more. The exact knock I'd heard the night the tapes reappeared. We both looked at the door. Neither of us moved. Then Tyler's phone buzzed on the table. 1 new message. Asterisk, you've both gone too far. Reset is no longer optional. Asterisk. He turned the screen toward me. There was no name. No number. Just the words, glowing like a threat we could no longer ignore. And just like that, I knew we were no longer in control of our own story. We never had been. The moment that message came through, Asterisk reset is no longer optional asterisk. Something inside me shifted. All the fear, the doubt, the second-guessing that had twisted my gut for weeks evaporated into something else entirely. Resolve. I had spent far too long being a passive player in a story I didn't know I was part of. But now, I wasn't just a subject or a variable. I was a father, a husband, a man who had been used, manipulated, and nearly erased, and I was done watching from the sidelines. Tyler was pacing, his eyes darting toward the door, his hands trembling. "They know we know," he whispered, voice cracking. "If they activate the final reset, we'll lose everything. You won't remember. I won't either. It'll be like it never happened." And suddenly, the stakes became real in a way they hadn't before. This wasn't about exposing a mystery or collecting more evidence. This was about memory itself, identity, legacy, everything I was trying to protect. If they could take that, then it wasn't just about surveillance or manipulation. It was about erasure. They had already done it once. Maybe more. The gaps in my timeline, the strange shifts in Tyler's behavior, my wife's paranoia, all of it made sense now. These weren't the glitches of aging or grief. They were engineered fractures. Cuts in the fabric of memory designed to keep us manageable, programmable. I looked back at the camcorder, at the tapes, at the wall safe I'd resecured hours earlier. Pieces of a puzzle that had been hiding in plain sight, waiting to be reassembled before the clock ran out. That's when I made the call. Literally. I pulled out the backup phone I'd stashed months ago, the one without any smart features, no internet, no GPS. I called the only person outside of our family who might still know the truth.
Don.
The retired cop I used to bowl with. The one who once warned me. Sometimes the ones closest to you keep the darkest secrets, not because they're evil, but because they're afraid of what they've become. When he answered, there was no surprise in his voice. No confusion. Just a long, heavy pause. "You finally found the hole in the fence, huh?" he said. My blood went cold. "You knew." I suspected. I didn't want to believe it. But when your wife started coming to me in '98 asking about off-the-books IDs, shell companies, private tracking software, I started digging. Then one day, she stopped coming. Told me to burn everything. Said it had gotten too deep. That if anything ever happened to her, someone would come looking.
Who? She didn't say.
But now I'm guessing it's you. The line went quiet for a second. Then he said something I'll never forget. "They're coming tonight, Jim. The van's already circling. You've got one shot to stop them."
How?
"You still have the power junction in your basement?" I nodded slowly, unsure how he knew that. "Pull the main breaker. Hard reset the whole house. That'll disrupt their signal. But only for 30 minutes. That's all you'll get. After that, if you haven't found the source, they'll wipe you clean." I didn't even have time to thank him. I hung up, turned to Tyler, and told him to follow me downstairs. We yanked the panel open, flipped the main breaker, and instantly the entire house went dark. No lights. No hum of the fridge. No buzzing from phones or laptops. Silence. And in that silence we heard it. A faint mechanical click from behind the furnace. Tyler grabbed a flashlight, and we traced the sound to a panel that neither of us had ever noticed, sealed behind insulation, bolted shut. We pried it open and found what looked like a server core. Hidden. Custom-built. Still warm. This wasn't part of our system. It had been installed years ago. By who, I didn't know. But inside was a drive. No labels. Just a red strip across the top. A single line written in faded ink. Curtis / a memory root. I stared at it. "If we destroy this," Tyler said, "we might never get the truth. If we don't," I said, "we might lose ourselves." And that's when I saw it, wedged behind the server, half concealed beneath old insulation, another tape. Unmarked. Different casing. Older. I pulled it free and slipped it into the recorder with trembling hands. The tape clicked on, and my wife's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't stop them. It means Curtis lied to me. Lied to us. I thought we were building something to protect families from digital manipulation. But it was never about protection. It was about control, predictability, influence. The data didn't just track emotions. It reshaped them. Every smile, every fight, every hug, or silence. It was all pushed, all scripted. You think you're choosing, but they've already written the next 10 steps. They even tested memory implants. And Jim, I think they used one on you. More than once. Please, if you find this, burn it all. The servers, the files, the contracts. Don't leave it for Tyler. Don't let him inherit the experiment. Save him from it. Save yourself. I stood frozen. Tyler was pale, mouth slightly open, eyes locked on the ground like he couldn't even look at me. Is it true? He whispered. Was none of it real? I turned toward him, heartbreaking, and said, I don't know, but it's real now. That's all we have. I reached into the server, yanked the drive free, and slammed it onto the concrete. Tyler joined me, hammering it until it cracked open like a brittle shell, sparking once before going silent. The smell of burned plastic filled the room.
We didn't speak.
We just sat there, breathing in the dark, wondering what we'd just undone and what we might have woken up instead. Then, just as the 30 minutes ran out and the house's backup power began to hum, the recorder flicked back to life one final time. One last entry. One we hadn't seen. A different voice this time.
Male.
Older. End log. Subject: Jim Caldwell. Cycle complete. Observation: deviation from programmed trajectory confirmed. Recommend subject be retired or repurposed. We stared at each other, the implications sinking in like poison in the blood. They hadn't just been watching me. I was the experiment. From the beginning. And the twist? Tyler was never the test subject. He was the control. It's strange how quiet a house can feel after you've broken the very foundation it was built on. In the days that followed the destruction of the hidden server, there was a heaviness in the air, not fear, not even grief exactly, but a silence thick with unspoken truth. Tyler and I moved around each other like survivors in the same storm shelter, knowing something massive had passed over us, yet unsure whether we were safe or simply in the eye. For the first time in weeks, there were no knocks at the door, no anonymous texts, no black SUV idling across the street. The silence itself became suspicious, almost eerie, as if they had simply pulled back. Not because we beat them, but because, maybe, we had finally fulfilled our purpose. Maybe that was the test all along, to see what we would do when we saw behind the curtain. Tyler tried to act normal, to find a rhythm again. He went back to working on code, but there was a certain restraint in his process now, as if he was afraid that with every line he typed, he might accidentally rebuild the very thing we just destroyed. I understood that feeling more than I cared to admit. I spent hours in the basement going through the remaining tapes, finding pieces of my wife scattered across time, memories, warnings, quiet confessions she'd hidden away like landmines. One tape in particular stayed with me. She was sitting on the edge of our bed, holding a photo of Tyler as a toddler, her voice trembling as she said, I wanted him to be real. I wanted this family to be real. But I don't know if they ever let us be. That line played on a loop in my head. What did it mean to be real when your choices were nudged, your emotions logged, your reactions recorded? Had we lived a life of our own? Or one curated by invisible architects who saw us as a case study? I thought about the nights I stayed up wondering why I felt disconnected from my own memories, why certain moments felt out of reach or covered in fog. Maybe those weren't just symptoms of aging or grief. Maybe they were deliberate edits. Someone once told me that memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. And now I couldn't help but wonder whose blueprint I'd been using all this time. The biggest question, the one I had to face, was about Tyler. If he was the control, the stable baseline they used to measure deviation, what did that make him now? Free? Or still under someone's thumb, just in a new way? He had inherited not just the digital tools but the psychological burden of knowing too much too soon. And while I wanted to protect him from it, I also knew that the only way forward was honesty. So I told him everything I remembered, every inconsistency I found, every clue that made me doubt what we were. He listened, quietly, and when I was done, he said something that surprised me. Even if they watched every second, we still lived it. That makes it ours. It was a simple statement, but it grounded me in a way nothing else had. Because no matter how much of our past was manipulated, the pain, the love, the fights, the moments of laughter, they happened. They left marks. And maybe that was the most human thing about all of this. We may have been observed, analyzed, even engineered, but we felt it all. That couldn't be fabricated. Eventually, I packed up the tapes, sealed them in a box, and stored them in a place no one would think to look. I left one recording untouched on purpose, the very first one, dated before Tyler was even born. It was a video of me and my wife, standing in a small, undecorated room, signing a document we barely read, smiling like fools about to begin a new chapter. I keep it as a reminder, not of what we did wrong, but of how easily we trusted a system we didn't understand. Deborah came back. She'd gone off-grid, scared after receiving her own message, and unsure whether to believe the warnings or assume I'd lost my mind. But once she saw the evidence, heard our mother's voice on one of the tapes, she understood. We spent a full day just sitting together, revisiting memories, trying to separate what felt real from what now seemed scripted. There were no solid answers, but there was comfort in the fact that we could ask the questions together. As for the system, whatever program Curtis created, whatever experiment we were part of, I don't know if it's truly gone. The silence could mean we won. Or it could mean they simply moved on to the next subject, the next family, another test. I've come to accept that I may never know. But that doesn't keep me from checking the corners of every room, from taping over the webcam, from keeping my router unplugged when I don't need it. Call it paranoia, or maybe wisdom hard-earned. Either way, I refuse to sleepwalk through the rest of my life. Every now and then, I catch Tyler staring at the wall where the server once lived. He hasn't said it, but I know he wonders if we made the right call. If we could have used that technology to uncover more, or maybe even control it for good. But then I see the way he hugs me a little longer now. The way he looks me in the eye when we talk. The way he stopped sleeping with headphones in and started asking real questions. That's not data. That's healing. The final twist? There may be no final twist. Just the knowledge that we were part of something much bigger than ourselves, and that we chose to step out of the maze instead of following the path laid out for us. That choice, more than anything, was ours. But sometimes, when the house is too quiet and the shadows stretch a little too long across the floor, I still wonder if they're waiting, watching, studying the aftermath of our defiance. And if so, I hope they're taking notes. Because this time, the story wasn't about control. It was about taking it back.